unusual for a sitting trial court judge back in 1992 and held a press conference saying our nation's drug policy is simply not working and we have to put our heads together and come up with something else. I have made a much more hard statement on this since that time. Now when I talk to Kiwanis clubs and universities I tell the truth, which is drug prohibition is the biggest failed policy in the history of our country, second only to slavery, and I'm going to support that. I'm proud to say that I was the Libertarian candidate for Vice President of the United States in 2012. I'm also a member of something called LEAP, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, and in fact have been pretty much from the outset. It was started in the late 90s, I believe, something like that. It's a speakers group. We have former police officers, we have former judges or present judges or DEA agents or whatever else. And so the head of the guiding light now of LEAP, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, is Neil Franklin. To my right, Neil, introduce yourself.
Thanks for being here. I think this is an exciting topic, and if you happen to be downstairs when I spoke at 1:30, one of the things I said, especially as it relates to the Libertarian Party and our liberties in this country, this is the one single issue that, in my opinion, erodes our liberties more than any other single issue. So I'm Neil Franklin. I'm a 34-year law enforcement veteran from the state of Maryland, beginning with the Maryland State Police, retired from there in 1999, went on to work for Baltimore City as the head of training for 4 years there. Most of my work was either in law enforcement training or narcotics enforcement, criminal investigation. I then went on from there to another agency for 6 more years before becoming the executive director of LEAP back in 2010. And, we have conversations about our police officers all the time, and we expect our police officers, to, once they hear about the failed war on drugs, and, we think that they should stop and change like that. It didn't happen that way for me. And it's not going to happen that way for most of our cops. So the reason I'm saying this is, to ask you to be patient with them. Now if they never want to continue to look at what we're trying to show them, then that's another issue. But I say this because, after a couple of decades in policing, there came a time, and all the way through my Maryland State Police career of 23 years, I didn't see the problems of drug prohibition. After all the arrests that I made and being commander of the Northeast region for the Bureau of Drug and Criminal Enforcement and having all of those men and women make all these arrests, I didn't see it. It wasn't until the following year in 2000, a good friend of mine, Ed Totley, was working undercover for the Maryland State Police, and he was buying cocaine on a task force with the FBI in Washington, D.C. The guy who was buying cocaine from decided that, okay, this is the time I'm going to rip this guy off. I'm going to keep his money, and I'm going to keep my drugs, because I'm going to double my profit. That's the nature of that game when it's underground and illicit. There is no recourse, and if you're going to rip off another drug dealer, you know what? You better dispose of them, because the nature of the business is retaliation on that guy. He was going to rip that totally off, and in order to do that, he figured he needed to kill him, and that's what he did. He shot him at point blank range. That's why on his badge you'll see the shroud. It's his honor. And it was that moment that followed us long enough to realize, to see the violence associated with the illicit drug market. I thought of other police officers I knew who were killed in some circumstances. 2 years after Ed was killed, I had 2 in Baltimore City that were killed by drug dealers. And then also around that same time, there was a family of 7, the Dawson family in Baltimore, East Baltimore, who was killed by one drug dealer. He firebombed their home in the middle of the night when the mother was working with the police to get him and his crew arrested from outside of their house. So whether you're a cop, whether you're a civilian, this creates, at the end of the day, policies of drug prohibition are counterproductive to public safety within our communities and also within other countries. So that got me thinking, but even after that, it took me a couple of years to realize and and start looking at the data. I came across LEAP's new website, signed on as a member of LEAP, and then started learning from people like Jack Cole and Peter Cripp and Judge Gray here about other things, incarceration, mass incarceration, our civil liberties, our constitutional rights, the Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment violations, civil forfeiture and the problems of that, and so on, and I continue to learn more and more today. So that, in a nutshell, that's who I am, how I got to this place, and I know this conversation today is going to be about, a lot about changes that we're now experiencing in our drug policy, and what it's going to look like going forward. So I'm going to pause now and let our wonderful judge here introduce himself.
My name is John Buttrick, and my experience with this issue is a little bit different than what you've just heard. I'm a longtime libertarian. In fact, back in the 1980s and 1990s, I was very active in the Libertarian Party. And in fact, was 3 times on the platform committee, and twice I was the chair of the platform committee. Most of you are too young to remember any of that time period, but I was, like most people at this convention, opposed to the war on drugs more on a theoretical basis than from seeing the system, the criminal justice system, work out for both. Because I was a business lawyer, I had no connection with the criminal law at all, and I was busy writing those platform planks about how the war on drugs must end, because I understood about how black markets are created, and from an economic point of view and a corruption point of view, that the awful results of the what Harry Brown used to call the insane war on drugs. He'd never say the war on drugs, he'd say the insane war on drugs. Then my life changed because I became a Superior Court judge in Arizona, and for about 12 years sat on that court, and now for the last 4 years I've been a United States Magistrate Judge for the District of Arizona. And during this time period, the last 16 years, I've been politically inactive, but I've been very active in terms of seeing the results of the war on drugs at the ground level. Not literally the ground level, but the next level up after people are arrested and they go through the system. And today I might tell you a couple of stories about that, and some things that you may not have thought about the way that the war on drugs impacts the criminal justice system in a negative way. And I'll save a little bit of that till later. I'll jump in and tell stories in that regard. But now I have a much different perspective. The war on drugs is even more pernicious than I believed it was 20 years ago, because I've actually seen people's lives ruined. I've seen the corruption that takes place within law enforcement and even sometimes within the judiciary, although that's rare, where in fact this enormous black market has effects, in many cases unintended effects, in some cases intended effects, that destroy the very fabric of our society in large part. Anyway, that's where I've been, and that's where I am right now. I appreciate your attention here today.
I say, folks, the biggest oxymoron in our world today, is the term controlled substances. Why? Because as soon as you prohibit something, you give up all of your controls to the bad guys. Today, with regard to cocaine or methamphetamines or whatever, we have no control whatsoever with regard to their quality. Boy, is that a big issue. Quantity, place of sale, age restrictions, licensing. We give all of that to the bad guys. And by the way, who is winning today with regard to the war on drugs? Prison guards union, juvenile street gangs. Pretty much every juvenile street gang we have in the country gets most of its money from the sale of illegal drugs. They use it as a recruiting tool. Hey, you want to make some money? You too can do that. Come join our gang. That's not a particularly good idea. You get into this, look at alcohol prohibition. There really are parallels here. And alcohol prohibition creates it. Mafia. Gosh, I wish we had not done that, because the mafia got its toehold, foothold, leg hold, whatever, and they still remained thereafter. It wouldn't have happened but for alcohol prohibition. You could look at the emergency room statistics and see that a lot of white lightning or bathtub gin, whatever, and people would drink it, it'd be a bad batch, it'd attack their nervous system, they'd die, they'd be in a coma, etc. That went away when we repealed alcohol prohibition. And then you look at it this way. I'm a libertarian, joined here by several others who read it. You all know who Robert Downey Jr. is, that gifted actor. We were talking about this earlier. He is a lifelong heroin addicted person. He's doing pretty well now from what I understand, but he's going to have to be careful. He'll have that craving. He should be careful. But it makes as much sense to me, as a libertarian or any thinking, breathing human being, makes as much sense to me to put Robert Downey Jr. in jail for his heroin problem as it would have Betty Ford in jail for her alcohol problem, right? You know, Betty Ford, President Ford's wife, was an alcoholic. It's the same thing, isn't it? It's a medical issue. And let them come closer to medical professionals that can help them instead of rendering them automatic criminals and pushing them farther away. But I think we will all come in on this, and I think you will too. If Robert Downey Jr., Betty Ford, you or I drive a motor vehicle impaired by, you fill in the blanks, methamphetamine, marijuana, heroin, alcohol, which is my drug of choice, that's a crime. Why? What's the difference? What's the difference? Now, yes, by my actions, I'm putting your safety at risk. Legitimate criminal justice function. But now my libertarianism comes in, and I use that word whenever I'm talking with people. You know something? It makes as much sense to me for the government to tell me as an adult what I can put into my body as it does what I put into my mind. It's none of their business. Hold me accountable for my actions, not what I put into my body. And the criminal justice system was designed to keep me from hurting you, to keep us from harming each other. Yes, but it's really woefully unprepared and inappropriate for them to try to protect me from myself. Okay? We need to get this word out. We're making progress. California, I'm from California, we're going to have an initiative on the ballot, November this year, to treat marijuana like wine. It's going to pass if we do our job anywhere close to right, and at that point, hear ye, hear ye. I love that sentence. Hear ye, hear ye. You know, it will be the end of marijuana prohibition nationwide, because the federal government will not be able to internalize this damage. Here in Florida, you're making progress. I think you have medical marijuana now. So let's just pursue this stuff. Yes, the drugs can be harmful. No question. They can be sometimes addicting, they can be harmful. Of course, so can chainsaws, but that's different. Maybe. But it's the drug money that's really causing the harm. That's huge. Ask Mexico. You know, with regard to these beheadings and the corruption and the crime and the violence, the gangs fighting each other, has nothing to do with drugs whatsoever. Nothing. It's all drug money that causes this stuff. And it's our drug money too, by the way. You think I care about this? You know, really, I am so incensed that we have done this to our fellow man here and around the world. And it's up to us to change it. It's the libertarian issue. We're making progress. Maybe we should start taking a few bows for this, and then people will start seeing that, hey, libertarians have other good ideas as well. But these are things that we simply must win. I'm sure Judge John here and Neil, we're clearing houses, and I hear these stories about, you know, my son or my daughter or whatever, and they're addicted to these various drugs, and they're trying, and then they get arrested, or asset forfeiture. I mean, you hear all these stories. It is the biggest failed policy in the history of our country, second only to slavery. Do you disagree with that, Neil?
Yeah, no.
You really love that. I was softball.
No, because and the reason I say it because I went to the judge to talk now. You mentioned some stories and things that you would like to talk about, but I'd like you to talk now because then after you talk, I want to talk about some of the policy changes that we're seeing.
Yes.
Okay.
And it's on a number of different levels and where we're kind of like headed now.
All right. I think we all know that there's a basic violation of human rights going on when people are being, and this is what we all know, when people are being arrested because they took a particular substance, not because of their actions afterwards, as just Ray was talking about. Not talking about people who are driving vehicles while impaired, or beating up other people, or stealing things, or whatever. We're talking about simply people who use the so-called controlled substances, and they're arrested, and they're tried, and they're put in prison, or in jails, or they have a felony or a misdemeanor on their record, which can have all sorts of negative impacts on the rest of their lives. And we always think about that in that paradigm. We think about somebody who is arrested or caught with drugs or drug paraphernalia, and they're arrested, and they go away, and they get screwed up for a long period of time. I'm going to talk about something different. I'm going to talk about the invisible, what I call the invisible war on drugs. And it happens inside the judicial system in a way you probably never thought about. Here's what I challenge you to do. First of all, I want you to think of a cohort of people. And who are these people? People who are wrongfully accused of crimes. And there are lots of such people. They're either arrested, and sometimes charges are brought against them, sometimes not. And they're weeded out of the system because a mistake was made. Because policemen, prosecutors, judges, even juries, from time to time can make a mistake. And so you have somebody who is arrested wrongfully, and they have all sorts of opportunities, because the system is pretty good at this, of weeding out these meritless cases. The policeman says, well, okay, I'm going to let you off with a warning. Or the prosecutor says, there's no charge to be brought here, I'm not going to charge you. Or the judge at a probable cause hearing says, there's no probable cause to believe that you committed a crime. Or you go to a trial and the jury says, not guilty. Or an appellate court says, he was convicted, but it was wrongful, go back, start over again, or release that poor guy. All right, that system works fairly well. It's time-consuming, it's expensive, etc. But I want you to think about all those people. There are thousands of such people every year all across the country. Now I want you to put another element into it. At the time this person was stopped, let's make believe the crime was burglary, all right? He didn't burgle anything, but he's wrongfully accused of burglary. At the time this person is stopped by the original policeman who wrongfully believes that burglary was committed, he's searched. He's searched incident to the arrest. And what do they find in our innocent person's pocket? They find a little bag with a green leafy substance in it, which turns out to be marijuana. What does the policeman do? He says, burglary and possession of a controlled substance. What does the prosecutor do? He says, look, burglary and the marijuana charge. Yeah, that's right, controlled substance. What happens after the point, further on in this process? At some point in this process, they figure out he didn't commit the burglary. He's innocent. But wait, there's another count here, a marijuana possession count. A possession count is on this charge. Now what are we going to do, say the prosecuting authorities? You know what they do? They start to say, well, maybe there's a deal that can be made here. And they contact the defense lawyer. And they say, yeah, your guy's up for burglary and marijuana possession, but let's talk a deal. Now, what does the defense lawyer know? The defense lawyer knows that his client is telling him, I didn't commit this burglary. He's also saying, yeah, it was my marijuana. Well, I did not commit this burglary. So the defense lawyer says, okay, maybe I can get you a deal. So the defense lawyer and the prosecutor talk with one another, and they say, how can we deal this guy out? Well, we can have him plead guilty to the marijuana charge, because we know we can prove that. Or, how about this great idea? We'll have him plead guilty to the burglary charge, or some sort of lesser included offense, maybe trespass, and on burglary charge. Remember, he didn't even commit the burglary. He was nowhere near that crime. But we're going to plead him guilty to the trespass, and we're going to recommend a very low sentence to the judge. And in exchange for that, we're going to dismiss the marijuana count. We're going to dismiss the possession count because we're such nice guys in the prosecution, we're going to do that. So everybody signs on to this. Why do they sign on to this? They sign on to this because the possession count is a slam dunk conviction. He did have it in his pocket. So what happens when they come before the judge and they've got this deal? The judge reads the deal. It says dismissing count 2, the marijuana charge, and he's going to plead guilty to this lesser trespass thing, and he's going to agree to a 10-day sentence or whatever, and a year of probation. And the judge says, sounds fair, and he makes the defendant, what they call allocute, actually stand up in court and say, yeah, I trespassed on this guy's land. Even though it's a lie, it was not there. He's nowhere near this guy's land, but he says, yeah, I was there on that date at that time, etc. Because his lawyer's going, yes, you have to say yes to that. You have to say yes to that, because the judge won't accept the plea otherwise. The plea's accepted, judge signs off, judgment is entered. This guy now has, besides having to serve time, the 10 days and being on probation, he's got a conviction on the trespass count that sticks with him for the rest of his life. Even though, and that's what the possession count goes away. That's what I call the invisible victim of the war on drugs. And there are thousands of those people walking all over the United States right now at this time. As we stand here right now, those deals are being struck. Probably in Florida and everywhere else. And it's invisible, doesn't go down to the drug conviction. We can't even cite the statistics on that. Nobody knows the statistics on that. How many, I'm making up numbers when I say thousands, I'm confident that it's correct. But nobody keeps track of this because it's invisible below the surface. So there's an example, unfortunately too many examples, of an impact of the war on drugs that creates incredible injustice. So that's something to think about, a little bit different.
Let me interrupt, because I want to tell you a war story too. Sorry.
Okay.
Then we can talk about options, because we do have options. Retired now. Actually, there's an RET after my name. I keep saying it stands for retired, that's retarded, but one way or the other. I was a federal prosecutor in the United States Attorney's Office in Los Angeles, and I was in the complaints department, which meant all day long I would receive federal agents. They'd come in, give us their reports, and we'd agree to take them to the grand jury for indictment or send them back for more investigation, whatever. So I had an FBI agent, and he brought me whatever it was he brought me, and I agreed to take it to the grand jury. And then he said, "You see this picture?" And it was a bank surveillance picture, you can tell. And he said, "We know who this guy is." And I said, "Well, no, we don't really know his name, but this guy has been robbing banks in a particular neighborhood, and tomorrow we're going to catch him." I said, "What do you mean?" "Well, a while ago, he robbed a bank in this area and he got $1,500. 5 days after that, he robbed another bank in this area and he got $1,200. 4 days after that, he robbed another bank in the area, he got $900. That was 2 days ago. We figured out he's a heroin addict, he has a $300 a day habit. Tomorrow we're going to stake out all the banks in this area, we're going to catch him." I saw this agent 2 weeks thereafter, and I said, "Hey, remember telling me this story about this guy? What happened?" "Oh yeah, we caught him, he's a heroin addict." And think to myself, even back then, 1975, remembering that sort of thing. Wait a minute, heroin is none of these drugs is expensive. You don't call marijuana a weed for nothing. It'll grow anywhere. Cocaine, heroin comes from the opium poppy. Very pretty flower. And by the way, the National Park Service was growing the opium poppy in Monticello for years until DEA made them take it out. If it'll grow in Virginia, it will grow anywhere. The only reason these drugs are expensive is because they're illegal. Okay, and then we'll start talking about options in Portugal and Switzerland and the rest. But I think to myself, wait a minute, why is this guy having to go and rob banks if he has this medical problem? And it's not that expensive. It's the only reason that it's expensive is because they're illegal, and these bank robberies were inflicted upon us all because of drug prohibition. So that's my war story.
So, we're now starting to hear about a number of criminal justice problems that we're having in this country. Obviously, mass incarceration, civil forfeiture, police-community relations, the militarization of our police department, and on. And so we're starting to hear about these things, and we're starting to see efforts of reform. Civil forfeiture, for instance, New Mexico, right? Okay, now you need an arrest, charge, and a conviction before you can take someone's property, the cash, whatever it may be. And there's some other states as well. There's even some attention to this issue on Capitol Hill with civil forfeiture because there's a equitable sharing program where local law enforcement, if you're not happy with what the state says you can and can't do, we'll go to the feds. Okay? We'll take that $10,000 that we took from you, that you were going to use to buy this car that you saw on eBay. All right, we'll take that $10,000, and we're a little restricted with our state policies in North Carolina, right? So you know what? I'll call up my friendly DEA agent, turn it over to them, they'll keep 20%, we'll get 80% back. Okay, and now it's really difficult for you to try to get that money back. So there's even a little bit of attention there on Capitol Hill. Not enough, but there's some movement. Let's look at incarceration. So now there are justice reinvestment policies and bills being introduced at the state level, at the federal level. Hey, let's start letting some of these nonviolent offenders, drug offenders out of prison early, mandatory minimum sentencing. This is unfair, where these judges had no choice in whether to give them 5 years, 10 years, or 15 years mandatory minimum sentences. Said 50 years for that. So now there's officers' Bill of Rights that provide certain protections to them regarding investigations and so on. Community policing efforts. And so what I'm saying is, they're making all of these little reforms and all these little corners of criminal justice, where at the end of the day, this big looming umbrella is drug prohibition. Now, I'm not going to say don't make those reforms, because for the lives of some people, those little reforms are very important. Getting out of prison today instead of 10 years from now is very important to some people, and I wouldn't dare take that from them. But what I'm saying is, if we would truly address the policies of drug prohibition, you're hearing about the stories here today, if we would truly address that policy to end it, it would take care of all of these issues. Civil forfeiture, militarization. The militarization of our police departments wasn't due to the war on terror, as many people think. It's the war on drugs. Started back in the 1980s. Our SWAT teams has just gone out of control in this country. 50,000 SWAT raids a year with these dynamic entries and flashbang grenades and kicking in doors and sometimes killing people. Again, for what's that? That weed, right? More than 90% of the raids that we do in this country are because of our drug policies, serving search warrants. Many of these search warrants that are being served are like photocopying pieces of paper where the police officer, all he has to do is put in the address, a little bit of information, that's supposed to be about probable cause. But they carry these photocopies and they just fill in the blanks. Take it to a judge signs it, next thing you know, it's a raid in the middle of the night, in the dark, a flashbang grenade or two, dynamic entry, dark clothing, masked people, and they expect it to go well. Right? Waking someone up out of the dead sleep, and they have no idea what's going on. And now they say, well, we shot him because he didn't obey our orders. After he couldn't hear because of the flashbang grenade. You ever been in a room where flashbang grenade is going on? You can't hear crap for a few minutes. So, anyway, just a couple of examples. So, where are we now? So what are we doing with policies? You heard about marijuana reform. So we've got Colorado, we've got Washington State, Oregon, Alaska, Washington D.C., California's coming online. We've got some New England states that will be coming online, and we're going to continue to move down that road. But that's just a small piece of this reform and ending prohibition. That's ending the prohibition of one substance, and we still have a long way to go with that. What about heroin? What about cocaine? What's going on there? What we're seeing are harm reduction efforts. So we're starting to see some legislation about, safe injection facilities, where someone who can go and use their heroin under medical supervision, maybe get access to treatment and so on. But that's still in theory here. We've got it in Canada, we've got it in other countries, but we don't actually have a place here in the United States yet. We have law enforcement assisted diversion programs, where the police, if they come across someone who is possessing, a drug, an illegal drug, they can then say, okay, we're not going to complete this paperwork on an arrest, but what we're going to do is we're going to take you over here to some clinicians and get you into treatment if you're willing to do that. And that's what, you know, the cops are doing in Seattle and Santa Fe and a couple other places. They're starting in a number of places, but still it's kind of like this nibbling around the edges and scratching the surface of this. Again, we need to pull the police completely out of this and deal with it as it is, as a health issue, and not just a physical health issue, but a mental health issue. You know, and so as we move forward with these policies, I'll let judges talk about some of those other reforms. You started talking about what's going on in Portugal and some other places. So why don't you go ahead and talk about Portugal and Switzerland and some of those?
I've really looked into this. I've taken this really seriously. I've actually written a book on it in 2001 and updated it in 2012. Why our drug laws have failed and what we can do about it. A judicial indictment of the war on drugs. The longest book title I've ever heard of. You get through the content. But I have a chapter on the erosion of our civil liberties. And I've taken the position and I have documented this. We have lost more of our civil liberties because of the war on drugs than anything in the history of our country. The war on terrorism is starting to encroach on that. But does that mean that we're better shaped today because of the loss of those civil liberties? You lose your liberties to the government, you never get them back. And so I went back arbitrarily 1971 when I graduated from law school and said what the status of the Fourth Amendment protections was at that time, and citing only United States Supreme Court drug cases showing how our Fourth Amendment protections have been eroded, and I can go through and talk to you about it. It's really true. How many of you have heard of what's happened in Switzerland? The Swiss program. Gosh, you know, I indict the media for this because it's big headline news. Switzerland has a problem that regretfully the rest of the world pretty much does not have. Namely, pretty much all of their towns and cities are economically pretty well off. So they don't have any slums, down and out areas, skid rows, etc. But they do have heroin addicted people. So it's a lot harder to hide them there because, you know, we push them off into the skid row areas, they can't. And so they get, you know, sometimes a lot of people who use heroin are functioning very well, like Neil said, but there are some stereotypes that they're down and out, and they smell and they're ugly and get tired stepping over them and the rest. So they decided to do something in 1998 in Switzerland. They had a pilot program in 7 cities. They put a clinic in the areas in those towns and cities in which the heroin-using people were pretty much preponderating, and they had a staff of 3 people, a medical doctor, a social worker, and a registered nurse. They would go out into the drug-using, heroin-using community, bring these people into the clinics, and do the same thing you or I would do. They try to give them drug treatment to help them get off the drugs. But as a practical matter, one way or the other, people either that are heroin addicted don't feel they can get off their drugs or they don't want to. So they say, okay, if you have satisfied 3 criteria, we have a program for you. The criteria were, number 1, you're at least 22 years of age and have failed traditional drug treatment at least twice. Number 2, you are addicted to heroin. Not that hard to prove. And number 3, in the future you will be crime-free. If you satisfy this team of those 3 criteria, you'd be placed on the program. What does that mean? 1999, they started this program in which you would be given a prescription for heroin, you could have it filled at pharmaceutical prices, and you could use it injected under medically controlled circumstances at the clinic. Now, stop for a minute. This is not a so-called orgy of heroin usage, because remember, there's a medical doctor on this team. And the medical doctor would give you a blood test and then determine what the strength of your addiction was. And then you would be prescribed heroin that it was too much to have you go through withdrawal, but not enough to get that euphoria or whatever you call it. It would maintain you at your current level. Hence, by the way, the program is called Heroin Maintenance Program. Number 2, it is the only reason that any of these drugs are expensive is because they're illegal. So even the heaviest using heroin addicted person could satisfy his or her habit for a maximum of $10 a day. If they couldn't afford that, yes, it would be subsidized, but you're talking very small amounts of money. Go back to the story. The Minister of Health held a press conference less than a year after they started this program. Remember, it was supposed to be a pilot program for 3 years. He said, we're going to expand this to all towns and cities in our country right now that have a need. Why? Because of the amazing results we are seeing. Number one, crime in the neighborhoods surrounding the clinics plummeted. Why? What's the connection? Well, what does somebody that's addicted to heroin do to supply their habit? You know, my bank robber, burglary, theft offenses, hit you over the head at the ATM, all that sort of stuff. But if you're even arrested, you're off the program, which means that you have to go back to the hustle. If you have a $200 a day habit, you have to burglarize something like $2,000 a day of our property, find a fence to get 10%, it's a lot of work. So you're way behind the 8 ball if you commit any offenses at all. So people do not involve themselves in crime.
So you're saying the heroin addicts are the squeakiest clean people you meet?
Well,
the heroin addicts.
But merchants experienced a 7-fold decrease in shoplifting. They were very pleased. Number 2, drug usage in the neighborhoods surrounding the clinics also plummeted. Why? Well, what do people that are using drugs do to support their habits? Sure, burglaries and prostitution, but invariably they will get extra drugs and sell them to you, your neighbors, and your children in order to support their habits. But if they're even arrested, they're off the program. Hence, fewer people are selling drugs in the communities, fewer people are using drugs in the communities. Drug usage has gone down. I don't care what people's philosophy is. Everybody would agree. Crime going down, drug usage going down is good. Yes? Mm-hmm. It goes on. Employment has increased by 50%. They're starting to support themselves, pay their taxes off the dole. They are starting to get involved with better medical attention, so their health problems are being addressed, and they're starting to request actual drug treatment. Why? Because, Doc, I trust you now. I have a relationship with you. Take me on this next step. So I'll ask people, the Rotary Club or the religious groups or whatever, tell me any reason at all why we should not have similar programs in every town and city in our country where there's a need. I don't get any responses, but except one. And that is, they're sending the wrong message to our children. And that's what they sell. Okay, what's the right message? Go ahead and die. I know what the problem is. We can help you, but you failed our morality test. So we're going to let this stuff continue. Our children are smarter than that. What is the biggest, by far, success story with regard to any of these mind-altering, sometimes addicting drugs in the past 20 years in our country? And the answer to that is easy. Cigarettes. Mm-hmm. Mind-altering, sometimes addicting, hands down. Yes, it is. Why? By making tobacco illegal? Of course not. But by putting honest information into the marketplace, having social mores, having regulations. I venture to say we cannot smoke cigarettes in this building. Remember some of us older types when you could smoke cigarettes on airplanes? Oh my goodness. You know, okay, but we have cut cigarette consumption enormously.
Don't forget we tax cigarettes.
I know, well, if we tax cigarettes, and they found this out in New York, where they put really heavy burdensome taxes on them, and so they had people, was it Canada? Was it Canada going? I know they were going across the...
It's not everywhere.
One way or the other, if you put them too high, you're going to have a black market in them. So that's what's happening. Of course, don't get me started on taxes. You know, people don't know taxes. One way or the other, we simply must realize and gain from the experience of other people. I can talk about Portugal too, but we're a tandem here, so I'll leave it up to Judge Sean.
By the way, the taxation idea with very, very high taxes does force people to move around. They move around and buy to see where the taxes are as high, so they can purchase. So that's a lot of expensive energy for no purpose whatsoever. But it also creates another black market for untaxed cigarettes. And of course, then the state reacts by really cracking down on that. Remember, I can't even remember what state it was, but there was an awful case of a man who was
New York.
New York. A man who was choked and killed quite recently, and of course there were riots and lots of problems related to that. I remember watching that unfold on TV, and I couldn't figure out what they were talking about. They were talking about the crime that he was being arrested for, and had been arrested for on numerous occasions, was selling single cigarettes.
Right.
And I looked at that and I thought, in a rational society, who the hell would be selling and buying single cigarettes? I mean, cigarettes are addictive. You don't want one. I'll do it for the rest of my life. No, People want a pack of cigarettes or a carton or whatever.
Road college kids are gonna think of
Maybe so, but the true reason what was happening here economically was the taxes were so high that people couldn't afford to buy a carton or that. Just give me one and then I'll get money from someplace to buy another one and I'll do that. And it created a little market for single cigarettes. And of course, the reaction by the state was, gotta make that a crime, because then we're not getting our tax bite out of it. Although at some point they must have, because didn't it change hands before it got into this guy's hand? I don't know. But they wanted more taxes, and they couldn't allow this to go on, and so they passed a law, and God unfortunately ended up dead, maybe for other reasons also, but that struck me so odd. So what's going on across the United States? Well, we have, as you know, this plethora of initiatives, referenda, and state statutes where they are allowing on a state-by-state basis medical marijuana. In Arizona, we have medical marijuana, or just outright casual consumption for small quantities, as in Colorado. And don't get me wrong, every one of those steps is a good step. That's a step in the right direction. But it's fraught also with unintended consequences. And in our case, the unintended consequences is the state gets involved. And the state gets involved through taxation and regulation, and they go after the regulation with a gusto. All right, you people, you all voted in favor of allowing medical marijuana. Well, we'll show you now. We're going to regulate it. And nobody can regulate like we can regulate it. So we're going to show you how to really mess up the market. And you have regulations on locations, number of locations, how they have to either be together in the same district or far away from one another. We can't figure out which works best, so we'll do both. And when they can't be near a school, but they can't be near a church. I don't know why the church regulations are there. If they think the churchgoers are going to skip going to get on the way to church, they say, "Oh, wait a minute." I knew I needed some spiritual guidance, and now I figure I will go here rather than. I don't know. I don't get that. Or they think maybe you go to church, you hear the homily or the various go through the facilities, the church facilities on fire session, and you come out and you say, "Now I need marijuana." I don't know what's going on there, but there's all these regulations, but the crushers are all economic. It's taxation at the point of sale, sometimes to the point where it drives the price up. Licensing costs drives the price up. Extra security costs mandated by the state drives the price up. Drives the price up so much that it creates a secondary black market again. Right. So even in states like Colorado, there's still a black market because the costs have been driven up so high by the government regulations. There are also these odd conflicts between federal and state law that make doing business extraordinarily difficult. You see that with cash and banks. The federally regulated banks say, "Wait a minute, we can't take drug proceeds. That's opposite to federal law. That's a felony. You can't come into Bank of America and set up an account for Joe's cannabis joint. We can't do that, even though Joe's cannabis joint is fully legal under state law. So what does Joe have to do? Joe has to have tons of cash sitting around and get some sort of intermediary place to store the money. That makes his business a target for theft and burglary and armed robbery, etc. It makes the whole system get gummed up with additional costs that drive the cost higher. So that's the sort of negative unintended consequences of all of these various state law loosening of regulations. But I still stay for them all. I still vote yes, and advise everybody to vote yes on anything that will break the bonds of the outright prohibition. Everything is a step in the right direction. You just have to keep pushing after that to try to make things sensible within the state that you're in.
Neil and I have decided after this presentation that we're going to form a corporation. We're going to take it on the road now that Judge John is with us. We're selling shares in our corporation. Pretty good. Let's take any questions. We have some time, questions and answers. Yes, sir.
My question is, what do your peers think about your opinions on this? Neil, you said, give us.
What do our peers think? It's two questions.
Yeah.
Number one, what do they think privately? What do they think publicly? Privately, in the judges' lunchroom and the judges' elevators, they all agree what we're doing isn't working. Publicly, they don't want maybe John has the same experience, they just don't want to get in there and discuss this stuff. So they are much more quiet. Do you agree?
Exactly.
Yeah, let me, a quick example is, so when I started doing this work, especially as executive director, started speaking, really, I put up my Facebook page, which I use primarily for this, not so much for personal stuff. And my comrades told me, well, they attempted to. Okay, so the comments, they wanted to, in theory, revoke my Maryland State Police retirement card. You're no longer one of us, okay, then we're going to pull your card, I started to think about commenting back, but then all folks like you and others on my Facebook page just started pounding the crap out of me. I could do anything. As time went on, and remember I said it took a while for me to get to that point, and I knew that, and I recognized that. And as time went on, the comments slowed, and then all of a sudden I started to get private messages. Yeah, I get it. I started to see what you're saying. Oh, that was a great article you posted. Like the judge said, they won't say it publicly, but they'll say it to me. Now, slowly, some are coming out publicly, some are joining LEAP, and our recruiting efforts are increasing. But that was just a good example of what's what. I get not one negative comment on my Facebook page, and now I've got thousands of people on there, and I get none. And every once in a while, I get a private message saying, hey, with you on it, blah, blah, blah. And that's usually from the rank and file. At the street level, management still has issues. They're political.
1993, I was involved at Stanford University, the Hoover Institute, with Milton Friedman, George Schultz, various people, Joe McNamara, and we brought in, there were 3 different sessions, 50 chiefs of police from around the country, and we closed the doors and talked about this. And once the doors were closed and the microphones were turned off, they would basically say, I agree with you, I see the same thing, but I am a chief of police, I have a political position. And I have to be responsive to the mayor and the city council and the editorial boards in my paper. I can't talk about this. I need your support. I need your political support to allow me to tell the truth. So I tell people that all the time. It's up to us to legitimize the conversation. Yes.
Okay, so it's more of a moving forward kind of question. But from my understanding, basically, that in San Francisco, we had a bunch of AIDS patients. And I don't mean to sum stuff up in a I don't know, not polite manner, but we had a bunch of AIDS patients who were like, we're going to die, and we don't really care. We're going to start smoking pot because we're wasting away, and pot's going to make us hungry. And that kind of started the idea that maybe these drugs aren't what we've been told. And that kind of was the birth of the medical marijuana movement. And that has transitioned into the Colorado movement, which is complete legalization in the Northwest now, kind of moving in that general direction, which is a great thing, I think, in one way, because marijuana is different than everything else because it doesn't harm anything. I mean, maybe we'll come out to find out that if you're smoking pot while you're pregnant, actually we're not going to find out, it's true. If you're smoking pot while you're pregnant, your kid's going to have neurons form slower. Big surprise. But aside from that, it doesn't really cause any harm unless you're driving, like you said. So something that I've been reading a little bit about, and you guys may know more about this, is that they're starting to use MDMA as a therapeutic device for PTSD, especially with soldiers. And I was wondering how we as a party could potentially use that, because that would be like the first hard drug that we could kind of open up to the idea that regulation and proper application of this drug would be better. Have you guys talked about that or done any research into that?
The answer is yes. The question is there medical research, because there's certainly a lot of anecdotal evidence that marijuana is a valid, viable medicine. And now there's something called CBD oil, which I personally am convinced is going to be almost a medical revolution with regard to prophylactic, with regard to assisting your muscle, all these various things. I have been involved in the debate with various drug czars, and they have made the comment, oh, come on, there's no medical studies in the United States that show that marijuana is a viable medicine. And you know what? They're right. But talk about hypocrisy. We have all these valid institutions, the Centers for Disease Control, the University of California, Yale University, pounding on the door of the DEA saying, let us conduct the studies, and they don't do it. But there are studies in Israel, there are studies now around the world. It is a viable medicine, and for heaven's sake, if somebody with AIDS or in chemotherapy even thinks it helps them, digest food or get hungry or whatever. Let them use it, for heaven's sake. It's obscene, and we are
hypocritical argument that, no, I shouldn't say the most hypocritical. One of the most hypocritical arguments is this one about research. And just very recently, the Arizona Republic, which is the leading newspaper in Arizona, I'm commenting on our upcoming midterm elections, said, well, you know, in an editorial, it said, you know, yeah, there's medical marijuana, and we want to perhaps extend it to personal use, but let's hold on here until we get some research done, because there's no research showing that this is really helpful and not harmful, etc. We need strong research. Well, and I felt like, how bizarre is this? It's been illegal to do this research for the last 100 years, and now when people are clamoring to be able to continue use for, or at least experimental use for a number of different things, the authorities say, well, no, you got to do your research first. The research that we've made, that was a felony if you had done it previously. Now we got to go slow until you complete your full research.
Regretfully, we only have time for one more
Let
thing.
me just ask about MDMA.
Yeah, I think that would be a good break way to break the decision.
Right, so there are some studies being done regarding that use, being done professionally with the proper psychologist, with the person who's using it, number of sessions to resolve traumatic events in that person's life and other issues, psychological. So it is being done. We still have a lot of work to go federally regarding that research. Like Molly.
Last question, and then we'll be the last ones to leave, although I think we're being kicked out. Yes, ma'am.
So, I mean, you brought up the point about getting heroin and stuff off the streets and making it a pharmaceutical thing, that we've got to somehow keep big pharma out of it when the prices don't go down. Because they're notorious for running up the cost of drugs that have no active research costs.
You're talking about big pharmaceutical companies. First of all, you want to hear a little more hypocrisy? Do you know who the original founders of the Partnership for a Drug-Free America were? The cigarette industry and the alcohol industry. Okay, drug-free indeed. You know who the biggest sponsor today is for the, I always put my hand over my heart. The Partnership for a Drug-Free America, it's the pharmaceutical industry. They do not want marijuana to be regulated and controlled. Why? Because they cannot patent the plant, at least by and large. So yes, they are trying to keep this thing out. They can get involved, they cannot get involved, but there's big money behind drug prohibition, and it's time for that to be reversed. I'm going to preempt one moment and leave you with a story, and then we're going to have to be kicked out. And that story is that there was a man who, at the end of his life, he was on his deathbed, and he realized it, so he called his wife to his side and said, well, dear, I know I'm not long to this earth, but before I leave you, I've just got to get something off my chest. And that is that for numbers of years now, I've been having an affair with such and such a woman who lives across the street. And I don't mean to hurt your feelings, but I think you have a right to hear this and hear it from me. She looked at him, she thought for a moment, then she said, that's okay. I know. That's why I poisoned you. Kelly Curtin, who is the sitting police chief, and one of our speakers and one of our members. And did you have something to say about that?
I am a first chief. I'm actually serving. I speak on behalf of Leave. I was in Alaska last 2 years ago during the legalization with the entire chief of the Capitol in Stanford. The only reason I'm able to come out and I get fired as soon as I did was the Mackie police reporters go to the League website, sign up for emails, ask for speakers to come in and speak. My city prosecutor had me speak with his rotary car, the judge back to the legalization. Our city ordinance is a $100 fine, no arrest, no criminal history, no tow vehicles, you don't get tough, you get $1,100, and it doesn't want criminal history, and it's not a second measure offense, 20 cents for this matter. That's the most I can do currently under Missouri state law, but without these help, without people supporting me, without you guys inviting these speakers to come in, then people like to feel they're active, won't be able to come out the polls. So we appreciate your help.